I'm joined now by Congressman Adam Schiff, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. The president says there are fraudulent activities on the other side. He appears to be calling for Jeff Sessions, I think, to investigate his political opponents. What do you make of that?
Well, it's much the same as what we've seen from the president in the past, and that is he thinks the Justice Department is his Justice Department to do his will, to investigate his opponents. He doesn't seem to understand that the Justice Department exists to serve the interests of the public and the interest of justice. It's not simply his personal law enforcement arm. But I'm glad the Justice Department, I think, understands their responsibility, even if the president doesn't.
Your memo came out over the weekend rebutting parts of the Nunes memo, giving sort of a fuller sense of the context for it. And I found it fairly persuasive, although a lot of the facts had already been entered in evidence. My question is, given what Mueller's done the last 2 weeks, has it rendered the whole thing kind of moot anyway?
Well, I think the GOP memo largely discredited itself. But nonetheless, I think it's important that the American people see the actual facts that were presented to the FISA court and understand that the FBI was acting appropriately. It had plenty of good reason to be concerned that Carter Page might be acting as an agent of a foreign power, in this case, Russia. It's also, I think, significant that our memo discloses for the first time that the Russians previewed to Papadopoulos that they could help with disseminating these stolen emails. So weeks later, when Don Jr. goes into that meeting, when he writes back to those offering dirt on Hillary Clinton, he says, if it's what I think it is, I would love it. And we now know, and we can talk publicly about the fact that the campaign, at least George Papadopoulos, was aware both that the Russians had these stolen emails and that they were prepared to help with the dissemination of those emails.
That was one of several things that struck out to me. Can you speak a little bit more about that? We know there was this sort of cutout figure that was telling him the Russians had the emails. Tell us, what did they say further about help in disseminating them?
Well, unfortunately, I can't go beyond what the Department of Justice has authorized us to disclose in the memo. But I think it's the first time the public's been able to see one of the links here, and that is we knew from the Papadopoulos plea that the Russians had told the Trump campaign very early on in April of 2016 that they were in possession of these stolen emails. We now know that the Department of Justice presented to the FISA court information that the Russians previewed what they would do with this information, their dissemination of it. So when Donald Trump openly called on the Russians to hack Hillary Clinton's emails and be richly rewarded if they released these to the press, his campaign had already been put on notice that the Russians were prepared to do that and disseminate these stolen emails.
Is your committee still involved in investigative work? You have Hope Hicks coming tomorrow, and sometimes it can be a little unclear what is going on in that committee, given what David Nunes has been up to. Are you still engaged in investigative activity?
We are still engaged in investigative activity, although, we increasingly have concerns that the Republicans are preparing to shut us down. Some of them have talked publicly about their being under enormous pressure to shut this down. But we are bringing additional witnesses. We do expect to have Hope Hicks in soon. I can't specify when, but we expect to have her soon. We hope that she is fully forthcoming. There have been other administration witnesses that have testified to their role in the campaign, the role in the transition, the role in the administration. Steve Bannon, however, was under different instructions by the White House. They're evidently concerned with what he would have to say, and he wouldn't answer whole sets of questions. We hope that Hope Hicks, when she does come in, will be forthcoming. But yes, we continue to make progress, even though it's difficult, and even though the chairman continues to want the committee to focus on this attack on what he believes is the deep state.
I feel like Hope Hicks's determination about what she will or won't answer will partly be informed by what happens to Bannon. Has there been any further action after he essentially claimed this very expansive privilege in front of your committee?
There has not, and we have pressed the majority. Look, you said you were going to force him. You said you were going to consider, contempt if he didn't answer these questions. He didn't answer them, and you acknowledge that if we allowed no for an answer, we would effectively undermine our investigation and other committees' investigations as well. But that's the position we're in. We're still calling on them, and they're still not answering. We also need to subpoena Corey Lewandowski, who gave no explanation except that he wasn't prepared to answer whole sets of questions. He needs a subpoena, and it should be made Clear that if OPICs or anyone else comes in and they improperly claim executive privilege or just refuse to answer questions without a privilege, that they'll get a subpoena and that we're prepared to go to court and insist on getting answers.
Final question. Are you as surprised as everyone else seems to be by the news that comes out of the Mueller investigation?
I'm not surprised, really, that Bob Mueller is doing this in a methodical way, as he is. I will say one thing I found striking about the indictment of these 13 Russians, aside from the fact of its extraordinary detail, and that is what was not included in that indictment. And that is the whole Russian hacking of these documents, the dumping of this information, was not a part of that indictment. Now, there is ample evidence for Bob Mueller to have included it. I can only conclude from the fact it was left out that Bob Mueller wants that to be part of a separate indictment. Yep. And the key question there is that going to involve Russian figures alone, or are there going to be U.S. persons implicated as well?
That's the question that is on a lot of our minds. Congressman Adam Schiff, thanks for your time tonight.